What's going on, everybody? It is the one and only Q here from Retro Q Gamer, back with our 66th episode of our Quack experimental podcast. Now, you may notice that despite the pandemic and everyone dying left, right, and centre out there, well, we are not wearing a mask today because, let's face it, even though it's not episode 69, sometimes you just gotta raw dog it, am I right? Lots of stuff to talk about this week, and this, I really mean it. There is a huge amount of notes I got here. But without further ado, and I'm not going to beat around the bush or read around the tush, but we're just going to get straight into it anyway. So, first up, we have something that makes me and many other fans out there very happy. And that is the latest announcement that Shin Megami Tensei 3 Nocturne is being remastered for PS4 and Switch. Now, of course, depending on what you know about this game and the different regional differences, or not even regional I should say, but the different variations of the game, you may be wondering which one are we going to get. I can't wait for Dante from Devil May Cry to be in my Shin Megami Tensei game. Well, unfortunately for you, Dante from Devil May Cry, who used to be in a specific version of the game, is removed and replaced. So it's going to be the other version of that. There's a Japanese name, a character in there that I will completely butcher if I try to just say who it is, so I'm just going to go out of there. Chances are, if you know anything about Shin Megami Tensei 3 Nocturne, you know about this already. You know the different versions, the different character removals, additions, and all that as well. So, what do we know about it so far? Well, like I said, remaster, PS4 and Switch. It's going to be later this year on PS4 and Switch in Japan, and spring 2021 in the West. Now, since the PS4, my PS4 at least anyway, will officially be retired by then because I'll have moved on to PS5, well, it's a good thing that every game released on PS4 after July of 2020, which is this month we're in right now, has to be, or is required by the developer to be certified for PS5 backwards compatibility. So I will be able to play this backwards compatible on my PS5 without having to go back and set up this piece of shit Jaguar CPU that is the PS4. And that makes me very happy. As much as for retro stuff, I don't mind setting up the old console with the analog hardware and the analog screen and all as well. For more modern stuff, it just feels a bit more tedious. Thankfully, stuff like the Xbox One, the Xbox Series L, the backwards compatibility on those is great, and at least for the PS5, the backwards compatibility for PS4 stuff is going to make it semi-worthwhile. But speaking of Sony stuff anyway, we're going to talk a little bit about Spider-Man. Now, even though I don't care about the game for Spider-Man on the PS4 or PS5 at all, there is something that's a little bit interesting that has been announced that I'm going to talk about. Although, how do I feel about Spider-Man in general? I'm depending on how it is, I always thought the first trilogy of Spider-Man films were kind of overrated. I mean, the first one was decent. I don't even remember much of the second one, and the third one was shite. But then they rebooted it and rebooted it again. It's just been a bit of a mess. I mean, thankfully what's the dude's name now? Thankfully the Tom Holland ones are good. But anyway, we're off topic here. So Spider-Man Miles Morales on PS5. Now, of course, if you don't know what this is, well, Spider-Man Miles Morales is it's basically Spider-Man from the PS4, and it's on the PS5. But it has extra additional content. Most people are calling it DLC, locked behind a new generation and all. I'm not going to talk and comment about that whole thing here today, because originally, when Spider-Man was talked about and was shown off, it was native 4K, 30 FPS. Now, that's pretty embarrassing and pretty poor if you ask me, because you can say whatever you want about visuals and all that stuff. 30 FPS is just an absolute objective failure. There's a reason why screens for 4, hell, even coming close to 5 decades have operated on 60 Hz, not 30 Hz. So, yeah, there's a bit of a problem there, and anything is a failure. That's why games have been designed around 60 Hz for 99% of the time, up until the 7th generation when everything just fell off a cliff and became absolute shite. Now, anyway, back to Spider-Man. The game developers, I believe is Insomniac, I don't pay too much attention to it, believe it or not, even though I'm talking about it, have announced that there will be a performance 4K 60 FPS mode, which is fantastic. Even though I don't care about the game and I won't be playing it, The point is that they are listening and they are doing this kind of thing. We all know that Demon's Souls, which is a technical failure on PS5 as well, because it's running on 30 FPS, well, at least they are giving you an option for 60 FPS performance mode. And this is fantastic because it's the better of a worse situation, if you will. Just like this, they're giving you 4K 60 FPS. Will it be checkerboard 4K? Will it be lower quality settings and all? Almost absolutely certain it's going to be all of the above. But the point is, it's going to be 60 FPS. It is going to run better, play better, feel appropriate to the majority of people's screens, which, at long fucking last, is fantastic. Now, this is how everything should be. So, like I said, best of a bad situation. Well, I guess how everything should be would be running at native 4K 60 FPS the entire time and then having everything scaled appropriately. But yeah, having to... You get my point anyway. Now, there's an extra little side benefit to this. Not just because everyone who is going to be playing Spiderman Miles Morales on PS5 is going to be able to do so at the proper, appropriate frame rate of 60 FPS. Well, all those Sony cooks, those Sony fanboys, those Sony defense forces, those Sony idiots, and I hate the term, but those Sony ponies, because just that one just doesn't make sense to me. Just because it rhymes, really, fam? Get out of here. Anyway, all of them who were screaming, 30 FPS is fine, 30 FPS is fine, after Sony showed off all their stuff, and pretty much all of it was 30 FPS, all of those people, I was going to say ponies, all of those people are completely fucking exposed. Fucking fanboys. Exposed. Speaking of things that are going to be exposed, we are going to talk about more fanboys, more idiots, and, well, of course, we're talking about the Switch. We're talking specifically about Crysis Remastered. Now, you might remember that originally Crysis Remastered was scheduled to launch. Actually, it was in around now, but it was delayed the same day it was officially announced. And that was all due to the fact that the launch trailer leaked a day early and there was massive backlash because it looked like a piece of shit. It looked like a terrible, minute upgrade at best. And of course, Crysis is not known for that. Now, of course, what they've done is they had delayed, originally at least anyway, they delayed the Switch version, the Xbox One version, the PlayStation 4 version, and of course the only version that matters, the glorious PC Gaming Master Race version. Now, they delayed this by a few weeks. There was no proper release date, but they just said a short delay of a couple of weeks. But in the meantime, they uncancelled the Switch version, because it was basically pushing the Switch to the entire limit. There was no more that they could do to improve on the Switch version. So well, at this point, they have already released the proper Switch version in its normal form, if you will. Now, you may think that's all well and good until you hear what the Switch version is. So I have a significant list of technical analysis bullet points here about the Switch version of Crysis Remastered. And I will explain to you how it is arguably the worst version of the game, or at least the second worst version of the game, across all different platforms, both 7th generation consoles, the original PC release, and all of the upcoming ones as well. That this one will be, just for argument's sake, we'll say the second worst. It is the second worst version of the game. Anyway, let's go, shall we? So, Crysis Remastered on Switch, it's more in line overall with the PlayStation 3 and 360 versions than the original PC release. If you don't know anything about the PS3 and 360 versions out there, they were significantly downgraded and gimped from the original PC release because the consoles just couldn't handle it. The only advantage it had, and at this point, or well, when you look at the advantages it actually afforded at the time, was that it actually increased performance a little bit. Because imagine how bad it would have been if it was in the original engine. But it was ported over to the next version of the CryEngine. I believe it was the CryEngine 2 at that point. It might have even been CryEngine 3. I don't think it was that far along. But yeah, you get the idea. Now, so because it's more in line with the PS3 and 360 releases than even the original PC release, that means a massive reduction in stuff like geometry on key objects, removal of certain visual features and techniques, and I wanted to save this next piece, this next comment until the end, but I'm going to put it in right now. They had to remove the Ascension mission. They had to remove an entire mission from the game because it was too complex, performance heavy, and advanced for the Switch to run. This is a 2007 game, by the way. This is actually, you know what? Because I almost even forgot about this, because the PS3 and 360 version, this is the worst version of the game. It is incomplete. It does not have every level in the game. This is incomplete. This is the worst version of the game. It is 90% of the game. It is not the finished full game. Everyone has always said, oh, but at least on the Switch version you're still playing the full game, even if it runs and looks like shit. Well, in Crysis, you're not. Now, okay, I kind of got a little bit off topic and just went on my little mini rant there that I was hoping to save for later. So back to our bullet points. Now, supposedly, okay, there are, well, I shouldn't even say supposedly. Why do I say supposedly? There is a dynamic resolution at play on Switch with temporal upscaling. That's right. Dynamic resolution and upscale at the same time. 720p is the average resolution of the game. There are drops to 540p and lower during heavy scenes and busy scenes. And it depends on what you classify as a heavy and busy scene. Obviously, with a dynamic resolution, it's constantly almost 100% in flux the entire time. Shadow maps have been reduced in portable mode. And of course, naturally, that is compared to the usual crappy 360 and PS3 version of the shadows. And then they're reduced even more in portable mode. Tweaks have been made to the lighting. Again, this is probably for the worse as well because, well, it's a Switch. And then there are, I'm going to have to read this one, sparse voxel-based global illumination implemented on Switch for more realistic indirect lighting. Now, basically, in certain situations, this is an improvement over the original release on the PS3 and 360, so that does help a little bit there too, because it says that the new lighting model more closely resembles the original PC version. So that's right, the new lighting, sparse voxel-based global illumination that they're implementing, it means the lighting is better than PS3 and 360, but it is worse than the original PC release. That's right, imagine that. Post-processing suite has been enhanced, which is, I guess, a benefit in a way, a lot of different extra effects and all that too. The cinematic depth of field has been enhanced as well. Destroying objects can temporarily impact performance because there's more things to calculate and more computations to run at the same time, but if you've played Crysis, you know just how much and how often that happens and how much it's going to affect it. Destroying vegetation updates a lower, well, see, I'm going to have to explain this one. Destroying vegetation updates at a lower frame rate on Switch. Basically, it means if you're playing the game at 30 FPS, let's assume it's a locked 30 FPS, it means that when you destroy vegetation, it ticks at a different speed. So it kind of breaks apart and calculates and all as well at maybe 15 FPS. Because, again, it would be far too computationally intensive to run on this piece of shit hardware. Now, back to more of this. Foliage density more in line with the PC game compared to the last generation console port. Not going to edit that one out. Anyway, so they have updated the foliage ever so slightly. So it's not going to be as bad and poor as the PS3 and 360 version, but it's going to be closer to the PC release, the original PC release. That is the important thing to mention there as well. Now, that of course, well, improving everything is of course better, but just remember, Crysis is set on a tropical island. it's foliage for days. You look absolutely everywhere. It's foliage, foliage, foliage. So that's a bit of a problem. Now, the fidelity of shadow maps is lower on Switch compared to the original PC version. Like I said earlier, lower quality shadows overall. It doesn't just mean lower quality shadows in portable mode, it's lower quality shadows overall. And then you bring it into portable mode and they're even lower quality again. Yikes. Parallax oh no, we skipped one. Flashlight shadows are still present but absent from the first stage. So if you're not aware, the game starts at night. So when you're playing a game at night where you pretty much is the number one time you would need flashlights, it's too computationally intensive to run on this piece of shit, and therefore they have to be removed. Imagine that. Literally the worst version of the game. Parallax occlusion maps are gone on Switch due to handheld limitations, but could return for docked play in a future patch. Now, if you don't know what parallax occlusion maps are, I'll try to give it to you in a very, very brief way. So, parallax occlusion maps are basically a different version of tessellation. It's not as advanced and not as enhanced as tessellation is. If you don't know what parallax maps and tessellation are, usually when you have a regular, let's say, ground map, you have just the texture, the surface it's on is a straight line. And then you have, if you will, you would have a texture that would go on top of it. And it would, when you look at it, the design of the texture is designed to simulate as if it's 3D, as if some parts of it are higher, some parts of it are lower. Now with tessellation, it actually makes that flat surface, not the texture, but it makes the flat surface into like bumps and cracks and raised and everything. It looks much better. It's more computationally intensive, but it looks better because instead of simulating cracks and dips and valleys and peaks and all in the ground, it actually renders them like that. So the ground is made like that. Parallax occlusion maps are very similar to that in the sense that they are a texture that is specifically designed to, maybe it gives small variants of it, but it's designed to, based on where you're standing and how you're looking at it, it kind of morphs a little bit on the fly. Now, of course, because of being constantly in motion and all as well, sometimes it leads to a little bit of weird artifacts and weird jigs out, but it's not as good as tessellation, but of course it's not as demanding as tessellation. So at the same time, this being completely removed because, well, the Switch is a piece of shit, yeah, you get the idea. Naturally, it doesn't look anywhere as good. Now, they've also improved water rendering in some way. This doesn't say if it's above water or underwater or anything like that. But they've also said that rendering underwater areas have largely removed stuff like rocks and plants, which basically means when you go underwater, it's just this big, like, I can't even say Mario 64-esque thing because there were actually rocks and plants in Mario 64. But you'd go underwater and instead of it looking like an actual underwater area, it's just going to be one big barren wasteland because there's less to render there, and the Switch is a piece of shit. There is constant frame rate stutter and frame rate persistence issues within 16 millisecond spikes, which is pretty poor because that way, even if you had a stable frame rate of 30 FPS, you would still get stutters and whatnot too, which is a piece of crap. Usually hits 30 frames per second, which is improved over last gen console releases. Congratulations, you're running slightly better than 2005 hardware. Congratulations. I don't know why that's a good thing. Oh, but it's handheld. Doesn't matter if you understand how technology works. This is not impressive whatsoever. Also, when the action heats up, of course, there can be dips in frame rate as you would expect, and the frame rate is similar in portable mode. So, like I said, this is literally the worst version of the game. No matter how many slight improvements there are over the actual, or well, the previous worst versions of the game, the PS3 and the 360, you are now paying for an incomplete version of the game, which is barely, on a technical level, barely better than those versions. And in some ways worse. But yeah, entire level removed. No longer getting the complete game. Anyone who supports this is a fucking clown. You are fucking clown shoes. Go back to fucking clown world, you fucking goon. But this proves yet again that the Switch is an absolute joke of a platform. It's absolutely terrible, absolutely disgraceful, and it is a pure piece of shit. Anyone who, again, I just want to say, anyone who supports this, I laugh at you, I look down at you, I disrespect you in every way. Every fucking way. I cannot take you seriously. You are just the absolute worst. You are a dreg. Absolute dreg. You are the problem. Everything wrong with gaming. You are a fucking tool if you support this. And remember, this is a perfect example, like almost every other Switchboard out there, of a Jurassic Park quote. Just because you were so preoccupied about wondering if you could, you didn't even wonder if you should. Clearly, you shouldn't have. But let's move on from the worst of something, the worst platform, to almost the best of something, because we are going to do some Persona celebration. Now, we're not talking about Shin Megami Tensei 3 HD Nocturne that's being remastered and all. No, because that's technically the Shin Megami Tensei series. And someone's going to go, oh, but Q, that is the original one that Persona actually spun off. Yeah, I realize that, but that doesn't mean it can't be better. But anyway, we're going to talk about Persona, because Atlus and Sega have announced that Persona 5 Royal, the one that launched just a few months ago, not the original one from 2016/2017, depending on where the world you live, but Persona 5 Royal has already sold 1.4 million units worldwide. Now, that is brilliant, because that actually brings the entire Persona series up to 13 million units in sales. Oh, but Q, that's a tiny amount. That's right, it is relatively a tiny amount, depending on what you're comparing it to. But believe it or not, Persona is a very niche series, although thankfully it has been getting more notoriety ever since the likes of Persona 5 completely took over the world, Persona 5 Royal, and of course, the next one we're going to talk about, Persona 4 Golden, being ported to Steam and selling 500,000 copies in a month. That is just under half of what it took the Vita to sell in 7 years. Now, this is no surprise whatsoever, because the Persona games are absolutely amazing games. Their RPGs are some of the highest quality RPGs you'll ever play out there. I highly recommend every single person who is into RPGs and JRPGs to go out and play Persona 3, Persona 4, Persona 5, whatever it is you need to do. Play these games, they are absolutely amazing. I can't wait for all of them. Persona 3 FES, Persona 5 Royal, whatever it is to come to PC, I will gladly rebuy them all. And hopefully, replay them all as well. And not only that, but give me Persona 3 Dancing All Night. Well, Persona 3 Dancing in Starlight, Persona 4 Dancing All Night, and Persona 5 Dancing in Moonlight. Give me all of them. Give me Persona 4 Arena, give me Persona 4 Arena Ultimax, give me what will hopefully eventually be Persona 5 Arena Gigantamax, whatever it is. Give me them all. I will buy them on Steam. Persona 4 Golden looks fantastic on Steam, for a Vita game at least anyway, and it runs really, really well. And not to mention, it's an amazing game. I cannot wait for all of them to eventually come to Steam. Sega said a couple of years ago that they were hoping and working on bringing 3 of their biggest, most requested series to PC. They said Yakuza. We now have several Yakuza games. They said Shenmue. We now have both Sega Shenmue games. They also said Persona. We now have our first Persona game on PC. The first Persona game that is not on a PlayStation platform. At least the first mainline, I should say, the first mainline one, because you've got the likes of Persona Q and Persona Q2 and all that. But the first mainstream, mainline, main entry JRPG outside of a Sony platform now. And it has sold very well. And it is now only a matter of time before the rest of them come here. And that makes me so happy. So happy, because they're amazing. So damn good. In case you didn't realize, 2 of the Persona games that I've been talking about in this time are actually in my top 10 games of all time. That's how good they are. I say them in the same breath as I say Secret of Mana, Link to the Past, Chrono Trigger, Final Fantasy 6 and 7. You see my point. Shenmue, Persona is also up there. I can't wait. Now, next up, we're going to talk a little bit about the Analogue Pocket. That's right, you might remember the Analogue Pocket because it was announced about 700 years ago and then went complete radio silence in the meantime. But Analogue have actually gone back to promoting Game Boy games again. Now, if you pay attention to Analogue and how they handle their Twitter, you'll know that they typically, when they announce something, they focus on that for a while. All the GIFs and images and all that they post about it are just related to that platform. You had NES, 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 or SNES, 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 Mega Drive, Mega Drive, Mega Drive, Game Boy, Game Boy, Game Boy, or Game Boy, Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, and now they are back. Because they were recently promoting the NES because of their NT Mini Noir. But they're back to Game Boy, Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance. Which gives us hope. Not just hope, but gives us solid reason to believe the Analogue Pocket is either about to be announced for pre-order, or pre-orders open, or possibly even ready to ship. Now, this is all nearly 1 year after the announcement of the Analogue Pocket. And of course then, remember, they moved over to the whole NT Noir Mini and all, which did technically get delayed. But Analogue have put out a teaser. Specifically, it was a teaser about a time and date. Likely the pre-order date. Possibly even the just straight up ship date of the Analogue Pocket. And just so people are wondering, oh Q, it could be anything, it might not be the Analogue Pocket. They're using the same color scheme that not only the Game Boy uses, but they're using the same color scheme that they used for the original Analogue Pocket announcement. Now, you might be wondering, Q, when is this date? You're going to be super selfish and you're going to keep this all to yourself to eliminate as much of the competition as you can in order to try secure yourself an Analogue Pocket and a dock. Now, usually that would be the case. But fellow retro gamers out there, I got your back. I got your back like an arse crack. July 27th, 2020, 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. That is when the Analogue Pocket will probably go up for pre-order. Possibly go up for just straight out order. I know I am hoping to get mine and the dock. I'm not interested in one of the controllers. I want the dock. I want the Pocket. I can't wait. And just because we're talking about it right now, I do want to throw in one extra little piece in there as well. Naturally, I plan on using it a shitload handheld. I plan on using it a shitload docked and even stream it as well for many of the games I'm hoping to replay. But because there are two FPGA-based units in there, one of which is dedicated for the Game Boy, Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance, the other one is programmable for third parties or someone like that. Now, if you've been paying attention to how any of the other ones have gone, any of the other analog systems, you'll know that Kevtris, the guy who manually, single-handedly reprograms the entire FPGA based on every single game, at launch of all their other systems, he would put out a cracked core for something else. And the Analogue Pocket has more buttons than it should need. The Analogue Pocket has more buttons than a Game Boy. It has more buttons than a Game Boy Color. It even has more buttons than a Game Boy Advance. It's suspiciously exactly the correct number to use a Super Nintendo or a Mega Drive properly. I guess Super Nintendo has a little bit more buttons, but you see my point. And even though it's not officially technically designed to use ROMs, if you have that second FPGA with a cracked core, you can load ROMs off a micro SD card or an SD card, whatever one it uses. Well, imagine having a little device like that for your GBA, GBC, GB games with FPGA, and then every Super Nintendo or something game in there as well. I'm telling you, lads, I'm going from 6 to midnight just thinking about it. Good thing we're raw dogging it this show, aren't we? Man, I just realized with all these references and all this dirty talk and whatnot, I really wish this was episode number 69. I'm kind of going to have to really dig deep, and Jesus, that one's going to be tough to make up ground for. But anyway, next up, Ubisoft. I don't know how we can... Well, I guess this one can go sexual in a way as well because of what we're going to talk about. So, Ubisoft. You know those greedy French cunts that no one likes. Anyway, it's pretty much that they're all sexual abuse deviants. No surprise there, I suppose. So, surprisingly, I'm not going to talk about the whole PR thing and there's sexual deviancy and all as well, but if you've been following the gaming news, you'll know that there are a bunch of sexual deviants. Anyway, surprisingly, these greedy French cunts, unlike 2K, who are not French cunts but are greedy. Where am I going? I lost track. I just wanted to keep going with that. So yeah, 2K, who will be trying to charge you more for next generation game releases at the end of 2020 when the Xbox Series L and the PS5 launch. Well, Ubisoft, the greedy French cunts and sexual deviants, will not be charging extra for next gen releases. Very strange, isn't it? You think them of all people. Now, there are caveats, or there's one specific big caveat here. In their press release and statement about the whole thing, they specifically said their holiday 2020 games and releases will not be charged extra for on next gen, but they could reconsider for later games. So this could increase down the line. So basically anytime after holiday 2020. And if you ask me, probably even right after Christmas. Wouldn't surprise me if something just came out on the 1st of the 1st, 2021, and that was it. So, to give you some examples of all of this, basically, I expect a new Screedo, Assassin's Creed, or Watch Dogs. I expect them at normal prices this Christmas for even Xbox Series L and PlayStation 5. But Far Cry 6, which comes out early next year, I believe it's in February, that's not a holiday 2020 game. So it wouldn't surprise me if that one was more expensive, and then everything else was going forward as well. But speaking of weird ports and additions and stuff looking better, costing more, and just being a piece of shit in general, we have Dragon Quest XI Definitive Edition S. Yikes, that's a mouthful. Now, before we go any further, I will explain the difference between Dragon Quest XI and Dragon Quest XI Definitive Edition S. Dragon Quest XI is an amazing JRPG. It's fantastic. I highly recommend everyone play it. It's on the PS4 and it's on the PC. Naturally, I would recommend you play the PC version. But yeah, you get the idea. It's fantastic, blah, 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 yada, 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 as you would expect. It's on Steam. Now, it has just been announced that... Oh, wait. We have to go back to Dragon Quest XI Definitive Edition S. Yeah, what a mouthful. That's what she said. Sexual episode. Badum tish. Whew. So, Dragon Quest XI Definitive Edition S is the Switch port. Now, the Switch port naturally looks worse and runs worse because it runs on the Switch. And because if they had just ported over the regular version, it would have been a disaster, they had to rebuild the game entirely from the ground up to make it even run on the Switch, while even looking and performing worse. At the same time, though, they did add in a couple of extra additions. Most of it doesn't matter and is completely irrelevant. It's stuff like they can play it in the 2D mode instead of the 3D mode. It has the orchestral soundtrack, which is amazing as well, but that was modded into PC on day one. There's a couple of other things and all as well, but the big thing that they all tried to hold up as the definitive best version of the game were a couple of extra quests and quest lines. Now, if you know what these are and have seen them, they're absolutely laughable and an absolute joke. And the fact that anyone would use these as anything to praise as the best version of the game, it really just highlights how much of a Switch fanboy they were and why they were given a 10/10. It was just because it was exclusive, basically. But now, Dragon Quest XI Definitive Edition S is not only coming to Xbox One and Xbox Series L/Windows 10, also via Game Pass. I say Windows 10 because it's coming to the Windows 10 store, but this also marks the very first time a Dragon Quest game has ever launched on an Xbox platform. Now, also, it gets a little bit better and a little bit wider. The Dragon Quest XI Definitive Edition S is also coming to Steam and PS4. Now, it gets a little bit messy. You do not get a free upgrade or free update or anything like that if you own a regular game. There's also no upgrade or update or DLC option or path for existing PC and PS4 owners. This is because the Definitive Edition version of it is completely rebuilt and it's essentially a different game. It's not like they can just patch the quests and content into the game. It's built for literally an entirely different game, if you will, because it's built differently and all. Different versions, different. The way it's built is all very, very different. But it gets a little bit weirder and a little bit more messy. So the Definitive Edition on Steam is going to launch in December, the same time it's going to launch on Xbox One, Xbox Series L, and Windows 10 and Game Pass. Now, €40. The original version is still listed at €60. But it gets even weirder again. Because more interestingly to note, since the Definitive Edition S was built for the Switch, and it looks and runs worse, the PC and PS4, and presumably the Xbox One anyway as well, and Xbox Series L and the Windows 10 version, the Definitive Edition of those ones are going to be ported from the original Switch version, or the original Definitive Switch version. So they will look and perform worse in every way for the entirety of the game, not just the new content. And don't just take my word for it, although naturally you should. I know what I'm talking about, as always. But there is an official Dragon Quest XI Definitive Edition S FAQ website set up by Square Enix. And in this website, they detail all of this. They detail the fact that there will be no upgrade, no free upgrade, no paid upgrade, no DLC option. The fact that it will, they even specifically mention that it will look and run worse than your regular edition, because it is going to be the Switch version. So what they've promised is performance and visuals no less than the Switch version, but no better than the Switch version. Absolute disaster. Do not support this. I still will recommend to people, even if it's, well, I guess I shouldn't say even if it's more expensive, because realistically it will go on sale, and hell, the price will probably go down when it comes out as well. Buy the regular version of this game. Don't buy it on Xbox. Don't buy it, never buy anything on Switch. Don't buy it on PS4. Or if you do, buy the regular version of it. You can probably pick it up dirt cheap at this point. The same for PC. You'll be able to pick up the original version dirt cheap in a Steam sale, or just get a code somewhere online. Don't support this extra bullshit rickroll that's Square Enix. Sometimes my mind just goes back to the 90s. Don't support them. Tell them to fuck right off. Now, our final segment, before our true final segment, of course, is one that we've made a video on earlier this week. Not so much made a video, actually, now that I think about it, but we live streamed this. And, well, when stuff is fresh and stuff is new and all as well, it's a little bit raw. But hey, ooh, baby, I like it raw. Yeah, baby, I like it raw. Just call me ODQ, baby. Anyway, we're talking the Xbox Showcase, or realistically, as it should be called, the PC Multiplat Showcase. Now, the most important thing that I want to talk about in this, of course, is Halo Infinite, and how much of a massive disappointment the entire thing is. It looks like an early Xbox One game. Now, of course, it is a cross-generational game, so there are all sorts of cross-generational limitations, and frankly, at this point, from what I understand and what I'm led to believe just by looking at it, complete developer ineptitude. Now, to make it even worse, not only did it look awful, but it's not even Xbox Series L gameplay. So technically, what we saw is already the best version of the game, because, as Microsoft have confirmed, it was demoed running on a PC, a top-of-the-line PC, which is obviously going to be the better version than the Xbox Series L. This game was clearly rushed out for next-gen launch. Next-gen, hell, just quality in general. Next-gen features that have been touted, that have been thrown around for practically everything and all sorts of marketing, like ray tracing, is going to be patched in later, post-launch. They're not even going to do it. Despite, 5 years of development time and a $500 million budget, and 1,500 people working on the game, and they still absolutely fucking awful. Now, my chair is being extremely squeaky tonight. Anyway, let's go back to what we were talking about here anyway. So, some people are claiming, including someone we'll get to now in a minute, people have been claiming, oh, it's a year-old tech build, it's year-old gameplay, stuff like this as well. Do you really think that showing off terrible looking, terrible in general, year-old build, year-old gameplay to headline your biggest hyped event, your biggest hype next-gen showcase that you're promoting the entire time, it's going to headline it with your flagship franchise that's going to launch on the next console? Get the fuck out of here. Get the fuck out of here. Aaron Greenberg, who is the general manager of marketing at Microsoft, that fucking jabroni should be fired. This game is outlaw as fuck. It's ridiculous. I don't know how any of these people still have jobs. It is ridiculous. Now, I will say, okay, there are other promises and other, what do we call them, positives for the Xbox show in general. This is moving away from Halo. So, despite Microsoft and Phil Spencer and all shouting for the last couple of times that no one left behind, we're going to support Xbox One for a few more years and all as well, and that all first-party games are going to be cross-generation for the next couple of years, there were a few first-party games in that presentation that were only next-gen and PC, which is good. Because get the fucking Xbox One out of there, and the Xbox One S, and the Xbox One X, and the fucking Jaguar. Get them all out of there completely, as soon as possible. But this also highlights the other problem. So many mixed messages from Microsoft. For example, with the whole, just what we talked about a second ago as well, the Xbox One, cross-generational stuff, all your games will be available for a few years and all as well. But there's also stuff like Phil Spencer claimed about how locking people out is bad. Locking people out with timed exclusives is bad and all this as well. And locking people out of games because of a new generation and all straight away is bad. And then he goes on to lock people out in the Xbox family, if you will. The Xbox family of consoles and players and all. And not only that, but he's also gone and buy timed exclusivity for many different games. A lot of the games we saw in the showcase the other day are PC and Xbox, and a lot of the Xbox console ones, I guess, are timed exclusive, and yet Phil Spencer is going out and doing this. It makes no sense at all. It's just so mixed and so terrible. The messaging, while some of it has been great and very transparent and clear and all that, some of it has just been awful. Aaron Greenberg is one of the biggest offenders. He's several different times he's put his foot right in his own mouth and fucked it up straight away. But anyway, moving along, there's not much to talk about in here as well. Avowed might be a good game. That is the Obsidian made, or the new big AAA RPG that Obsidian are making. And I do think it's funny that this is a we'll call it medieval / gothic style game, if you will. High fantasy style stuff, basically. But I think it's funny that Obsidian basically made the best 3D Fallout game, and now it looks like they're going to probably make the best Elder Scrolls game, which I think is really funny in that way as well. But just overall, just in general. Oh, also, I will say, there's the whole thing with the DLC for the Outer Worlds. I would be hyped for it, but I downloaded it. Kind of really don't care about going back to it. Or if I did, it's more hassle than it's worth at this point. But hey, Epic paid for my copy, I guess, when they gave, who was it? No, I didn't give Microsoft, was it 2K? I think it's 2K. When they gave 2K all that huge amount of money, well, I guess in a way they paid for my copy. But the whole situation in general, between Xbox and Halo Infinite looking terrible, the mixed messaging, locking people out, some of it just looking awful in different systems and whatnot as well. This is why Microsoft and Xbox don't get better. People are out there defending, praising, supporting this shite. If you reward shite offerings, they keep giving you slop and shite offerings. overall, it just has me convinced at this point that Xbox is done. And I'm done with this piece of shit company. I want to say I will cancel my Xbox Series L pre-order. However, for YouTube purposes, I will not cancel my Xbox Series L pre-order. I will, however, only buy one game on it. And that's going to be Halo. And I'm not even going to play a Halo on it properly. I'm going to do it for coverage reasons. I want to do it for comparison reasons. I want to show you what developer ineptitude and company failings on the world's most powerful console look like versus a brand new, high-end, top-of-the-line RTX NVIDIA-powered 3090 Ti Super Mega Ultra Combo 2 Turbo Edition GPU and an AMD 4000 4900X with a PCIe 4.0 faster than the PS5 6500 Mbps read speed drive will completely destroy the world's most powerful console. Not just because of pure sheer grunt from companies that can do technology properly, but just to show you how much of a piece of shit everything Microsoft is. I hate Microsoft at this point. I hate Xbox. I think they're done. Several years from now, by the end of the Xbox Series L generation, they're done. They're done. They're going third party, full third party, because they're basically already third party. I can buy their stuff on non-Xbox platforms. They're already third party. You can buy some of their games on PlayStation, some of their games on Switch. They're already third fucking party. 5, maybe even 7 years from now, they're done. This generation is going to fucking flop for them, just like the Xbox One did. And then they're going third party, fully. They're done. They're going to live with nothing but Game Pass. Now that brings us to our final segment, just where we can round out the whole dealio here, as we always do. And of course, that is the number one segment, the most popular and requested segment that everyone loves every single week. Q, what's going on? What's up? What's going down? What's the 411? What's going on? What are you playing? Well, this will be probably the shortest version of this segment ever. I am playing practically nothing. Practically nothing. You might remember that about a week ago, maybe a little bit over, I talked about how I was in a gaming funk. I still am. Can't properly get out of it. So, do you know what I've played since my podcast last week? I've put about 90 minutes into Persona 4 Golden. And that's it. I have Metroid Prime 2 Echoes sitting over there beside my CRT. Haven't even turned it on even once. That's it. Just Persona 4 Golden. 90 minutes in a week. And that's it, nothing else. Can't bring myself to play games at this point. The only time I can bring myself to play games, I stomach such a short amount of it. And that's not because of Persona 4 Golden's quality. Obviously the game is amazing. And it's even a surprise that I can do as much as I can in that. But I'm going to slowly chip away at P4G. I hope I can continue at least anyway. But in the meantime, I just got to keep on trucking, I guess. Anyway, that is it for our 66th episode of our Quack Experimental Podcast. As always, I want to thank everyone for hanging out, joining me, shooting the shit, stomaching everything I need to say, and listening to my wise words of wisdom. But anyway, as you know I can't English. You know the deal as always. You know the drill. Comment section below. Hit it up. Comments, questions, thoughts, feelings, opinions, salt, praise, butthurt, whatever it is, leave it all down there. That's what it's for. And until then, until next time, of course, feel free to hit the appropriate button. Then let me know how I did on the video. And while you're at it, why not head on over, hit the subscribe button, and even ring that little notification bell, so you can, of course, be one of those glorious first people to check out these amazing high quality production episodes that we put up every single weekend. Until then, I'll see you all next week, and remember, winners don't play switch ports.